contestants to order. Welcome to the semi-final of Ryoso Cup 2014. On the opening government, we have Funbalt Bendel, and on opening opposition PやうーA, closing government SF①A, closing opposition NKG-A. On the motion that this has give up the euro. Now I'd like to open. Let me set up open
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By having the single currency among several countries, we acknowledge that there are some potential benefits to countries, like the maximization of liquidity among those countries, and liquidity in terms of human resources or monetary resources or so on, or like welcoming more tourists from other countries, or like facilitating the trading process or so on. But given that those potential benefits, like the possibility that those potential benefits exist, well, we think historically and in these several decades, like the harms of having the single currency actually overwhelming all those potential benefits. That's the evidence here is that the economic recession in Europe happened, and we still cannot get out from that crisis. And we think in order to get out from these crises, and especially for the countries who are not like Germany or for not like France, we are starting probably on the opening government. And the model here is very simple. Like roughly, we are aiming to like we are totally okay with like having political union or like having the free visa, like free visa or those kind of things. But we are simply opposing to having the single currency. So we are okay with in the near future, like the union, the area will be like the ASEAN area or roughly those kind of thing. Let's move on to our substantive. So firstly, I'm going to talk about like. I'm going to talk about like what is the problem under status quo, like how having the single currency is actually widening the gap between like countries, wealthy European countries, and also poor European countries, and why the single currency is kind of the root cause of the problem that we cannot get out from the crisis. And secondly, I'm going to prove to you why, after taking this proposal, these problems can be solved. So firstly, about the problem. So we think that the gap between wealthy European countries like France or like Germany, and also the poor countries like PIGS are actually widened for these decades because of like having the single currency. Why is that? Because the problem with the single currency is like that there is one actor that manipulates the power of that currency, right? For example, so when you think about the case of euro, like actually the central bank in the EU is actually manipulating this currency, and they're like deciding how weak or how strong those currencies are against other countries. And we think actually that central bank itself is actually occupied by like bureaucrats from France or from Germany. Actually, like most of all like seats are occupied by those countries, and actually we are trying to even if we try to like fix that, but like because of like the political like power imbalance between countries, like actually we are struggling to solve that problem. And what's going to happen in that situation is like Germany or France is always pressuring those institutions to like make the currency's power preferable for them. Like what is exactly happening is like because Germany or France are the countries that want to export things from their country and rather than importing their country. So they are heavily relying on the exportation. For example, like the machines or cars from Germany. And we think compared to the pigs have a totally different situation. They want to rather import things, so they'll import those machines or mechanics from other countries, and also Middle and Eastern European countries as well. And what's going to happen is like Germany or France always prefer weaker euro against other dollars or yuan, and we think that because of that preferable situation for those countries, actually pigs have to suffer consistently, and they cannot get out from those situations, and they have to. I think that the reason why they still cannot get out from the single currency is that there is existence of PR pressure or political pressure upon them. When the pigs or Italy suddenly think suddenly Portuguese say we're gonna opt out from this euro, and that is the only that country will be isolated, and that will be kicked out from those economic framework, and we don't think if that country is powerful as England, and then that is totally okay. But if that country is just the usual moderate weaker country, then we think that is very difficult for those countries to opt out in the ES closing.
Alright, so given that the majority of trade inside the EU is intra-regional trade, where exchange rates play no role at all in deciding the price of products, what is the specific harm coming to Greece and Italy?
I think that fact itself is showing the problem with euro, actually interfering the trade with other countries, right? And we think that because of the currency, it's preferable for Germany or preferable for the exploitation. Those pigs countries, they cannot trade with other areas, especially with African countries or Eastern Asian countries. And we think that is one of the problems we are facing. And also, we think this is not beneficial, even not only for the pigs countries, but also for Germany and France in the long term. Why is that? Because we are facing the economic crisis, and because we cannot get out from that still. Those Germany or France are still having those heavy burden, and we think in order the important premise or is necessary prerequisite for usage of single currency among several countries is the power. The balanced economic power among those countries. Similar when those countries have similar industry competition, when those countries have similar industry structure, and they can actually maximize the liquidity among them. But when there is a huge when there is a huge gap between those countries, when we have more liquidity, and then the weaker countries that have more the things that to export, and then we think that the single currency actually works worse to those countries, and we think by taking this proposal, we can solve this problem because in the first place, I think those countries can use the local currency. They have they can have full autonomy upon deciding the currency power against other currencies. And we think, and also important things, they will not be influenced by the currency power of other countries. So we don't think what happened in the euro economic crisis, one problem happens and they will prevail to other countries. But what we don't think that will happen after taking this proposal. For all these reasons, we propose.
I thank Prime Minister for the remarks. And now I'll take over opposition leader of the open case with here.
So none of the problem presented from the Prime Minister was actually related to Euro. Obviously, it was external factors that come from outside of the Euro. These people have never told us why Euro is such a bad thing to do. The model we're going to support from the opening opposition is the current situation where we want to actually have a stable currency within these regional places, all countries, including Germany, maybe like Latvia, Romania, so forth. We are also happy to actually keep the status quo, for example, of the economical checks that exist in whether they can actually enter into the Eurozone or not, by actually checking, for example, whether the country have a healthy a GDP growth rate, whether the company are not messed up with the fact like a huge GDP debt or so forth. We're actually happy to support that model as it is. Then, I'll talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, what we think, especially to the developing, rather comparatively less economical weak country, like for example, maybe Greece, maybe Italy, or maybe for example Latvia, or Lithuania, maybe former Yugoslavia state, where those countries will be more able to actually receive an investment by utilization of the euro. So what we see that is going to decrease if that was being turned out into utilizing their own currency. Second, I'll talk about the speculative attack that is more likely to happen. I think this is about a fraud currency system, so I don't think we're not talking about system that is kind of like a Taiwan what happened before, but not something like that. But we're talking about that actually caused a harm by the high fluctuation of the currency you're utilizing, which is actually going to damage the long-term stability of the currency, a long-term prospect of an investment in other countries. My point, I'm going to talk about something different. So before that, 3 points of rebuttals. Firstly, I did about the recession and economic crisis. Firstly, this is not about the euro, but it was one, a problem of like a huge investment bank problem inside the United States that had been an external threat to the euros. Second, it was a problem of the Greece hiding all this massive debt inside the country with a political corruption, which was the problem, not the problem of euros. Thirdly, it's becoming fixed currently right now. That is why the country like Italy and Greece are now having at least like a certain slow step of like a GDP growth rate, so on. We see the problem is not actually remaining even now. Second, they told us Germany, and France actually fixed this currency into the extremely cheap ways because they want to earn export benefits, right? Firstly, we think this is false. Germany and France did not make the currency cheap, right, by their own wills, right? Currency became cheap because the economic crisis which happened in the form of out of 5 or 6 years, it was not their intention. Secondly, they were not actually wishing to do that. That is the reason why, even under the current status quo, when Japan and the United States are giving a massive quantitative easing to make the currency devaluated and comparatively euro evaluated, but a euro is not actually making that huge quantitative easing attack to actually make the currency cheap compared to the United States, Japan, we can see the intention of the ECB that they're not actually seeking for as a cheap currency like they have followed as much as they want to. We don't think that is a problem, and that is not the reason why France and that is not exactly what the France and Germany are doing. We don't think that's a problem to begin with. So, first argument. We think under the status quo, especially to the comparatively developing country inside of the euros, they're actually going to receive more investment by utilizing euros. Because we have to realize that euro is one of the currencies that has the most trust, where people can actually rely on to believe that if they actually make any sort of investment, that will come back. Then, what kind of thing is happening under the status quo? So, we think usually people actually, for example, buying bonds or larger developing countries to actually make an investment inside the countries where the country can actually earn the money from by selling the bonds and utilize the money for the investment. For example, they're happy to actually make an investment for the social welfare for the people, or actually make an investment into a certain industry, maybe like a facility, manufacturing, or for the information technology, or people farming, any sort of things. The government can actually make an investment where people can actually receive a job training, learn what kind of knowledge they're actually going to need for the job, and they're actually going to make a profit from that. Then, the reason is, investors outside the walls actually like euro because they can actually make a prospect. Because we know that when usually investors actually buy these bonds by actually paying the euros, they know that euro is something extremely stable. You know what kind of the currency exchange rate is going to be stable, so they can make a prospect. How much amounts of money they have invested will actually going to come back. Then those people does not want to play with the gambles, right? Then also, they also does not have to care about the government actually going, for example, like a bankrupt, or for example, actually won't be able to actually pay back the bond they're actually paying. Because they know that if the country goes wrong, like for example, what happened in Greece, ECB and Germany are actually going to help those governments, help those countries, right? So people does not have to care about like a bankrupt or any kind of the government failure in this situation. And then people can actually make, that they can be sure that the money they have paid to the developing country, like Latvia, Lithuania, will actually come back in return. They can also make a prospect on these situations, right? Then these huge amounts of money is essential for the developing countries to actually earn the money to make an investment, because in many of the cases, the developing country in euros, like Lithuania, Latvia, does not have that much of an industrial infrastructure they have in their own hands. So we think that is the benefit of the status quo. Yes.
So then why EFSL failed to collect the amount of money necessary to save Greece? Why it took more than 3 months to quickly inject the money to the Greece? It's all because of the politics and racist towards this country.
Well, firstly, we have to actually seek for the balance, right? It does not mean that we can actually inject a huge amount of money that is actually going to be beneficial, but we have to realize, even if there was a certain political process, we have actually, at the end, paid a huge amount of the Greece, which is not beneficial. Moreover, you have to support us. If the Greek was using drachma and actually failed, how are you going to save it? So, in after plan, what's going to happen? So we have to realize that if, for example, when Greece utilize the currency drachma, it obviously have no trust in the society. The government, people around the world is not sure whether the government can actually make the currency stable or whether they can actually pay back the bond they have actually in this situation. Then also we have to realize that governments of ECB or the Germany are going to actually less care about, because at the status quo, euro was not the problem of only Greece. It was the problem of the entire EU zone, which was actually utilizing euros. But once that now that a certain country is utilizing a different currency, they're going to have less incentive to actually care about those, for example, government become bankrupt or so forth, right? Which means government is actually going to lose trust. There will be a less investment into those countries because people are scared that if they actually buy bonds of Greece or buy bonds of Latvia, maybe government might go bankrupt. Or maybe, for example, currency fluctuation is so horrible that they cannot make any prospect how much money they're going to make when exchange rate is so fluctuating and they cannot sure how much money they can get when they actually return into yen, right? So that is the reason why those governments are actually going to die. But secondly, speculative attempts, right? So when there is always a fund that tries to actually raise up the value of the certain yen, for example, drachma, into extremely high prices by buying an awful lot and trying to sell it, and then other people realize that, look, like the value of like a drachma is going down, so we should also sell it too, right? And that is how this like a speculative attack is going to happen. It's going to be an extremely devaluation, for example, of drachma. Then what is going to be harmful? Then also that, and then governments won't be able to actually support that because those people usually do not have any foreign currency in like a central banks, and central bank is not always capable to actually support the stable currency rate in this situation. The harmful scenario is those governments won't be able to make a long-term prospect of what kind of industries they're going to have. Even if they want to actually devaluate their yen in order to actually support, for example, an export industry, sometimes they're going to make a high evaluation of the currency, which is actually going to damage those situations, right? Those governments won't be able to make a long-term prospect of what kind of industry they want to have, even if they make a certain investment. This currency won't be stable to support that, and those developing countries are actually going to suffer. We're the ones who are supporting the developing countries in Europe. That's why we oppose.
It's time to read up after the remarks, and now I'll talk about Deputy Prime Minister here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In order to conclude the opening government case, I'm going to give you the specific mechanism and how we think the economies in European countries are actually going to improve by giving up the euro, both in terms of how this affects the importation and exportation, and how this affects countries such as Germany and countries of pigs. But second of all, I'm going to talk about how this allows countries to have more flexible fiscal policy, and why we think that is vitally important for European Union or countries in Euro to reconstruct its economy. Before I move on to that point, several rebuttals to the opening opposition. First of all, and this was POI coming from the closing opposition, they asserted that European countries are mostly interdependent economical bloc. So what that means is that they don't necessarily trade, they don't really depend on trading with foreign countries, such as Asia and other countries. We think this situation is true right now, and we think this situation is extremely bad. Because right now what's happening is that all countries, and most countries in European countries' economy are in recession. So if you're trading with a country which is in recession, which the economic pie is shrinking, and that is necessarily bad. That is why we want to give up the euro as a consequence of that, incentivizing countries to trade with countries of other countries, because we think that relatively other countries are doing economically perfect. No, thank you. Second of all, they talked about how there's no problem with the status quo, and they assert that the problem that we mentioned is quite irrelevant to whether or Europe, because they talk about like European crisis. First of all, the problem right now is that euro is not reflecting the appropriately reflecting the economical situation of countries in Europe. Like Greece, relatively have strong currency. Greece, countries such as Greece, even though they have weak economy, they have relatively strong currency, right? Countries such as Germany have strong economy, but they have relatively weak currency. So the currency is not appropriately reflecting the economical situation of their own country. And this is an extreme harm, as my partner mentioned. As a consequence of Greece having like stronger currency than its own economy, it makes it very difficult for Greece to then gain profit by exporting their goods, because the cost of exportation necessarily increase. That is the problem. No, thank you. Third of all, they talked about how like economical crisis or fiscal crisis in 2007 or is not relevant to euro. We accept that, and they misunderstand the nuance which my partner was talking about. We're not suggesting that euro is the cause of economic crisis. We say as a consequence of economic crisis occurring, as a consequence of that, there's a huge disparity, a huge gap between the economical power of the richest country in euro and the poorest country in euro. And that's a problem when you have a single currency, because a single currency relies on the assumption that basically the economical power of each country is relatively the same. That assumption, that premise no longer stands, and that is the problem that we have been suggesting. Fourthly, no thank you, they talked about how like Germany and France is not manipulating currency, like they misunderstand the status quo. What we say is that European Central Bank is conducting massive amount of quantitative easing to affect its currency, and as my partner mentioned, like relatively like higher, those individuals who are in higher position of European central banks are held and controlled by ex-bureaucrats of France and Germany, reflecting the interests of Germany and France. So yes, they are manipulating. Finally, they talked about how like euro is a stable currency. As a consequence of that, it incentivizes investors to invest in European countries. Number of responses to that. One, we think that investors do not invest just because of currency stability, right? And oftentimes investors invest based on like economical structure, invest on like how strong the prospect of future economical development is for that particular country. No, thank you. So if, as a consequence of having this single currency, as a consequence of trying to pursue a stable currency that actually harms economical development, then no, investors will not have an incentive to invest in countries in Europe. But second of all, not yet. We say that just because you use a single currency does not necessarily mean that foreign investor will not invest in your country. Take a look at countries such as Myanmar, Indonesia, Malaysia. Like these countries are ASEAN countries which do not share similar currency, but still, like since they have at least like some level of stability, foreign investors do have an incentive to invest in those countries because the economical growth and prospect is strong. Not yet. But third of all, they haven't really explained to us why, when you have a local currency, that would suddenly become unstable. There's a huge logical jump between country having their own currency and the entire economy becoming stable, right? Because if that logic was true, then the economy in Japan, economy in the United States should be unstable because they use their own local currency. So we don't understand the logical logic between having a local currency and how that causes economic instability. Moving to the first extension, why do we think that this giving up euro is beneficial? Before that, yes.
Okay, there might be a benefit of export in your side, but you have to remember, these developing countries also have to import a lot of daily commodities from France and Germany, when import is going to be better if the currency is stable.
Thank you. That is going to be a very good introduction to my extension. So what we do think would happen after plan adoption is that each country would return back to a situation where they have their own currency. So Germany will have their own currency, Greece will have their own currency. So what will happen is that Germany's new currency would be stronger than the current euro, because now it reflects a stronger economy of Germany. Greece's new currency would be relatively weaker than the current euro. So why do we think this situation is better? First of all, for countries such as Greece, Portugal, or Spain, which will have weaker currency, they will be able to export goods to foreign countries because they have cheaper cost of exportation. As a consequence of that, they can gain more profit out of exportation, and they can use the revenue of exportation to invest in domestic industry, and as a consequence of that, lift their economy. So, but second of all, like for countries such as Germany and France, no thank you, they will have stronger currency. We accept that. And that means that they will have less revenue from exportation. We acknowledge that to be a potential harm to Germany and countries such as France. But we we think that those kind of harms is not necessarily offset by the potential benefit that this policy necessarily produces. Why do I mean by that? First of all, the image the foreign investor currently have towards Germany is that it is strong in the short term, but it is very weak in the long term. The reason why that's the case is because Germany, since like Germany and Greece, the reason why that's the case is because Germany necessarily have to pay for a lot of money to help and financially assist countries such as Greece. As a consequence of that, yes, in the short term, maybe Germany's economy maybe grow, but in the long term, financial investors necessarily consider Germany to be in a weaker position. After plan adoption, since Germany are no longer in the position of that financial burden, they don't have to financially help Greece, necessarily foreign investor will necessarily consider that Germany has a strong prospect when it comes to future development. But second of all, Germany has countries such as Germany has financial and economical capacity to reorganize its economical structure. So instead of depending on foreign trade, depending on exportation, they can shift their economical structure to depend more on importation, such as country in Japan where we rely 80% of our GDP on importation. So since countries such as Germany and France have the financial capability to restructure their economical structure as compared to countries such as Greece, we think that even if this causes harm to countries such as Germany and France, we think that harm is a necessary harm, and that is why this important motion stands.
Time to Deputy Prime Minister for remarks, and I'd like to call on Deputy
Mr. Chair, since opening government admin, the economic crisis is not happening because of the euro. The question they have to answer, but fail to answer in this class, is why now to give up the euro. We believe the euro is very speaking. The euro is rather stable compared with other currencies. Besides, this is good for the Western Europe, also the Eastern Europe, to hold this single currency in order to invite investment or get a fair trade between the West and the East. We are extremely proud to oppose this motion. My new substantive from the deputy speech is that I'd like to talk about how the absence of euro makes it impossible for the Eastern Europe or South Europe, which is the poor European country, to trade fairly with the Western Europe. Because recognized in the context of European Union, we say there is a strong connection between the West and East. Why this is making it difficult to trade with others. But people got tons of responses. The first thing, the opening government talked about how the investor never invests just because the currency is stable. Two responses to that. Firstly, this is actually not true. The reason why the Japanese government can publish the tons of bonds is because the Japanese yen is so stable compared with other currencies. This is the exact reason the foreign investors have continued to buy the Japanese bond. That is why this is actually not true. The second thing, Mr. Chair, my partner already spent lots of time to explain how the evaluation bond or currency is actually affected by the economic situation. There is no response whatsoever from that side of the house. That is why we say, as far as there is the investors who care about the value of currency, we say that our scenario must stand. So thank you. So second response, they talked about how even under their model, like Eastern Europe or some poor countries, can control their currency or value currency appropriately. Number of responses. The first thing, Mr. Chair, the premise of opening government is even under their model, such poor country will perfectly control the value of currency with stable political situation. But it's not true. For example, take the Greece, for example. The reason why the Greece caused the European economic crisis is actually the political system is not stable, which means there is no capacity whatsoever to control the value appropriately, especially in the context where the pressure from the foreign investor or domestic people exist. We cannot trust these poor countries itself. And secondly, Mr. Chair, we believe also compared with Western Europe, the Eastern Europe unfortunately have the unstable political system in the status quo. There is like the question they have to answer this way. It's why now to give up the euro in order to maximize the benefit for this country. And so rebuttal to the idea is the first thing beside this kind of poor country, not only in the Europe, but also for example African nation or Asian nation, is actually pegging their currency to the stable currency such as US dollar or the euro in the status quo, which means the example of Southeast Asian nation or African nation is rather supporting outside of the house, because in order for poor country to sustain their economy, is they have to peg the currency to strong value. That is why you said this is the better way for the Eastern Europe to peg their currency to the Western Europe. This is the reason we are very tough to call. This is the case of Iwata. No thank you. So on to my understanding, how the absence of euro make it impossible for the Eastern Europe to trade fairly. The first thing I'd like to recognize the context in the debate. The first thing, yes.
So if pegging the currency work, then why should not we peg the currency to like Germany, Greece? Like why do we need to have a single currency?
No. You are just missing the nuance. Because reason why we are supporting a single currency, this is impossible for Eastern Europe to actually decide or adjudicate what kind of pegging should be because we told you politics is not stable. You have to listen to my speech. So on to the first issue. The context. The message of the first is the main product of Eastern Europe is such as Greece or Lithuania. It's actually agriculture. And vice versa, the Western Europe actually producing the machinery. And also, Eastern Europe actually stick to the Western commodity because of the firstly the geographical reason and historical reasons. So what's happening in the status quo is the firstly, although the gap of commodity price exists between the West and East, since there is no gap about the value of currency, the trade between the West and East is rather fair. For example, agricultural product from the East and the machinery of the West. But under our, in addition to the current commodity price gap, the value of currency of East and West will significantly decrease. Also, this is widening the gap between the currency value of currency for 2 years. The first is that compared with Western Europe or other developed nations, the political situation or economic situation of Eastern Europe isn't stable, which means the foreign investor rather focus on the Western Europe or Japan or so on and so forth. And secondly, when the investment from the bond decrease, Eastern Europe cannot increase the value of currency at the end of the day. So what is the problem of this situation? We say this is make it very impossible or difficult for the Eastern Europe to fairly trade with the West. So what is the significant impact of this argument for 3 aspects? The first thing is that the Western Europe, such as Germany or French, can survive both paradise. The opening government explained why it's good, but it's at the end of the day, the Germany or France can survive both paradise. But the Eastern Europe can only survive in our scenario because we told you how the